Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank ECA and the Commission for the invitation to stakeholders to contribute to the discussion. So I would like to start with a reminder that many of you are very aware of already, of the main aim of the authorization process, which is to replace the substances of very high concern by safer alternatives. Indeed, the authorization is the main tool for phasing out and eliminating the substance of very high concern in the environment in Europe. And fortunately, it's a very good incentive for companies also to develop and use safer alternatives, and this is something that is very important for the environmental organizations. Indeed, despite the name is authorization, the goal is not to authorize, and indeed this shouldn't be the rule, but the exemption. Authorization should be very specific to very specific uses, not as a general thing. If it is granted, it would be only for a very limited time. That also reminds the overall goal of the process. So our first question is actually authorization delivering? We believe so. We believe it's working very well. Indeed, for half of the substances that are included in the Annex 14, no application for authorization was received, which means that all these substances are either out of the market or they have been replaced before the deadline for applying. Also, it's very important the overwhelming information that has been submitted by third parties during the public consultation on new alternatives that were not considered by the applicants. And this is also very powerful to show the technical and economical feasibility of these alternatives along the supply chain. Moreover, substitution is shown to advance thanks to many of the applicants' work in the research for alternatives before they submit their application for authorization, and this is very valuable too. Indeed, some of the applicants did find alternatives that were not available exactly at that time, but that's why they asked for temporary authorizations. And finally, it's very important to remind that the risk management measures has also substantially improved in many cases, even when as a result of the authorization process. So some applicants has implemented risk management measures after submitting the application. However, we believe that there are some aspects that should be improved. First of all, by the applicants for authorization that has provided insufficient information in our view. For example, on exposure, there is in general, a limited information submitted by the applicant, especially when the use applied for is too broad, then it becomes really difficult to justify and properly document each of the users they try to cover. Also, with regard to the real data on population that is exposed, many times they just use estimations. On the other hand, regarding the information on alternatives, some of them are not use-specific as demanded by the application for authorization process and the REACH, especially again for the broad uses ones. Many of the alternatives researched by the applicants are drop-in chemical substitutes, but they disregard another different alternatives to the uses applied for. So it could be a different technology, a different material, etc. Also important is the assessment of costs of alternatives that in many cases has been widely exaggerated, and substitution plans are mostly lacking in most of the applications for authorization. Finally, for us, is concerning the socioeconomic analysis submitted. On one hand, because they are They contain very limited information on the benefits cost for society, which is a core part of the application in our view. And on the other hand, because of the external costs of the use or release of this substance of very high concern are not included in the applications. So we found out that in general, the most problematic applications are indeed the ones that are applying for a very broad use. Indeed, with these applications, they are trying to cover many uses at the same time. They don't have enough information or communication along the supply chain, so they cannot properly describe the exposure scenarios, they cannot properly do the exposure assessments, they cannot properly look for feasible alternatives and doing the analysis of alternatives related with each use, etc. So what we feel is that they are more asking for a general authorization for the industrial sector than a use-specific application, which is what is intended under REACH. We have also some other concerns with the process. First of all, it's true that we have already communicated our concerns with ECHA mainly, and ECHA has reacted very positively to our concerns, and we believe that ECHA has made quite a substantial progress on the participation of stakeholders that were very much a problem for us because we couldn't speak during the discussions on authorization. So we have been granted very recently speaking rights, at least for the general points of authorization. Also, ECHA is working more on promoting substitution, and we believe this is very, very positive. And as Mr. Danset stated before, the transparency has also substantially increased in the public consultations for authorization. But still, we see room for improvement in the advice provided in the pre-submission meetings. For example, why many applicants that indeed found alternatives, but for example, they were not available right in this time, did not submit substitution plans, because we don't really see a case where a substitution plan will be actually submitted, because if the alternative is already there, is technically feasible, is cheaper, and is in the market, then they would just not apply for authorization. Also, we see a problem that the conformity of the applications is granted almost by default without further scrutiny on Article 62. Also, the confidentiality claims by companies are not properly evaluated by ECHA, and this has brought already some problems, improved though so far. And the participation, always there is more room for speaking rights in any specific case, and we would like to see more front runners engaged in the process. We have also some concerns in the way the committees are developing their opinions. In our view, there is not full consistency among the opinions. For example, in SEAC, in some cases, where a substitute is technically feasible, but is more expensive for the applicant, in some cases is considered as economically feasible, and in some cases is considered as not economically feasible, and we don't really understand what the criteria is for that. Also, we feel that the committees tend to grant a short review period before they have any negative opinion at all. So, for example, in the case where there was the availability and feasibility of the alternative was not proven, the committees are recommending short review period instead of not granting the authorization. RAC has dealt with low quality of data. They also we consider that they have to better integrate the combination exposure effects, for example, with DHP and DBP, that they were submitted the applications separately, but they are applying for exactly the same use under the same conditions. So these combination effects should be taken into account. And then with SEAC, we see a problem in the interpretation of feasibility of alternatives, that any increased cost means the alternatives is not feasible. In our view, this is too narrow. And on the other hand, we see a very poor consideration of the social and front-runner impacts of granting the authorizations. So are RAC and SEAC doing their job, which is to assess if the applicant is actually justifying the authorization case and they are either under adequate control, the alternatives are available and feasible, and the benefits outweighs the risk, or are the committees doing actually the applicant's job? And this is something we are concerned because of several reasons. For example, the fact that the request for the committees, RAC specifically, is asking for information after the application is deemed complete. And in our view, this is not what REACH states. In a way, helping applicants to improve their application once it has been accepted. Also, more worrying is the fact that they are carrying out some assessments and own calculations not provided by the applicant. And also the fact that they only focus in the viewpoint of the applicant rather than a neutral judge for society, including the alternatives users and producers. And finally, the development of reference DNLs that, in our view, are another way of helping the applicants doing their job. So I would like to wake you up with some provocative questions. First, the first one is my favorite. Is it ECA and the Commission demonstrated that REACH works by ensuring all applicants get an authorization? We fully disagree with this because in our view, REACH only works when the proper justified applications are accepted and the poor or insufficient applications are not accepted. And we do believe that indeed the best authorization is the one where no application is received. So how can we ensure that the authorization process is really an incentive of substitution instead of a facilitation of an authorization? That's a good question, and we believe that the innovative and safe companies should be prioritized among the obsolete and hazardous companies. So how can we join forces to show that these invisible substitutions are taking place in the market? Because indeed, if a company has substituted, they don't have to apply for authorization. So we don't really know which are those companies. And I think it's worth it to think how to call on these companies to share these cases. For example, during the process of the substitution portal, more than 500 companies shared with us their substitution real cases, and that was very, very interesting. And also, are the standards for technical and economical feasibility consistent? Even more provocative, is there any standard at all? And we believe that this is something to take it very seriously in this discussion. So we have a few recommendations for ECA. We would like ECA to properly apply the burden of proof, as it is stated under REACH, is on the applicants to demonstrate either adequate control, benefits outweigh the risk, et cetera, et cetera. the applications with either broad uses or insufficient data are not acceptable and they should be rejected. There is need to properly define economic feasibility beyond no more expensive, because it's not about do you want to make this external additional expense, or can you do it actually? And in our view, economic feasibility is more a synonym of possibility, let's say, or affordability. So also it's a better balance that it's needed for to measure, on one hand, the cost for the applicant, and on the other hand, the cost for external risks caused by these chemicals, and also the availability of alternatives, the lost market for companies that are doing the safer chemicals and they have no the possibility to introduce their alternative in the market, etc. And finally, just a few conclusions. So in our view, incomplete applications should be rejected to give credibility to the process. The process is not credible if all authorizations are given by default, and of course is completely against the whole spirit of REACH. Substances of very high concern are being authorized for continued use even when safer alternatives are already widely available. And this, again, is really creating a very bad precedent that we believe that should be stopped, amended, and then we can go forward with the process, because there is no understanding from the society on what the benefit is for the society to have these authorizations granted. Also, the transition to safer alternatives should be encouraged, in our view, and this would increase market opportunities for green companies and incentive for sustainable innovation, rather than facilitating all authorizations for being granted. Also, only taking into account the applicant's point of view is a very narrow approach in our view, and the benefits for society and even the companies producing safer chemicals or alternatives should be taken into account, because at the end of the day, why should the society accept a risk if there are safer alternatives out there? The only reason we can come forward with is because it's really a very much needed chemical, and this is the case we want to see proven in the Socioeconomic Analysis Committee and in ECA. So this is all. Thank you for your attention.